Alrighty, we will go ahead and get started. My name is Lacey Ballinger, and I am the Director of Collections and Exhibits at the Tallahassee Museum. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy it too, but thank you for joining us for this latest installment of Tallahassee Museum's Mixology virtual lecture series. We offer it bi-monthly on Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. for anybody who hasn't been here before. As many of you know, we started this series during the pandemic or during the U.S. shelter-at-home mandate. I know we have some international attendees, so during the U.S. national mandate. So we did it to provide a variety of unique experiences, including cocktails and crime, sipping with science, and a toast to history. It is exclusive for an adult audience, although we do offer some family-friendly programming. We hope it is a fun learning experience for you and while you learn about history, natural science, and wildlife. If you are so inclined, we do have a virtual tip jar that is set up to receive donations, and I can share that with you, or you can find it on our events pages under Museum Mixology. Some weeks we will be discussing difficult topics. They may be sensitive based on current events, and we do appreciate you understanding that we are going to be talking about current events. As a museum, it is our duty to interpret those and contextualize them in a political, social, and cultural context. So we do insist that this be a honest, open-minded learning experience for everyone, where it is safe to express differing viewpoints. Tonight we will be learning about terrorism and domestic radicalization from Richard English. Richard is not only a crime scene investigator for the Wakulla County Sheriff's Department, but he is also an adjunct professor of criminal justice with St. Leo University. He just had a grandbaby, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Like yesterday, so super congratulations. Very proud of his family, as he should be. And tonight's topic was his doctoral minor. He's definitely knowledgeable about it, and I appreciate you being here, Richard, and I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Lacey. Greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the presentation. One thing I want to say first is sometimes terrorism can be a hard thing to talk about. Terrorism is violence. And things happen with terrorism that are not good. There actually are no good things that can become of terrorism and domestic radicalization. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the different types of terrorism that we can experience, both within the United States and abroad. Terrorism and domestic radicalization are things that are going on every day around the world, and the radicalization process has been taking place for a while now, and some of the groups are very aggressive in how they reach and radicalize our young people. So let's start off with terrorism and radicalization defined. Terrorism is difficult to define as its meaning changes over time. It's a pejorative term, like I said, a lot of negative and derogatory meanings. The Federal Bureau of Investigation defines terrorism as the unlawful use of force or violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives. Now, there are many different agencies within the United States who have different definitions for terrorism. It's not easily defined, and it can actually be defined more by specific agencies as it pertains to the work that they do. The term radicalization, everybody probably hears it. Do they really know what it means? Refers to the psychological process of adopting extremist positions, okay? One of the most important things to remember is that anybody can be a terrorist, okay? You cannot stereotype terrorists by skin color, by race, ethnicity, by religion, by religious denomination, by sex, or place of origin. Anyone can possess extremist beliefs, okay? American terrorist threats. These are some of the terrorist organizations or types of terrorist organizations that our government deems threats to the United States. You have white nationalists, white supremacists, white separatists. the Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, neo-Confederates, skinheads, Christian identity, Islamic extremists, and other extremists, environmentalists, anti-abortion, animal rights. America's historical terrorist. 1993 and the 9/11 World Trade Center extremists are an example of religious extremists from abroad. Timothy McVeigh and 3 other conspirators in the 1995 federal building bombing of in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, killed a large number of people, men, women, and children. He was actually a far-right extremist. He was actually upset with the American government with the way they handled the siege in Waco, Texas, and also Ruby Ridge, and lashed out at the government. That's why he struck the building that he did. Eric Rudolph. I don't know if a lot of people even know who this is. He was the actual Atlanta Olympic Park bombing. The FBI actually had someone else in their sights for a long time. They did a terrible job in the investigation, and actually they singled out this gentleman and ruined his life. And then they figured out that it wasn't actually him. 2001 anthrax attack. You may remember that right after 9/11. And Dr. Bruce Ivins, who was an American scientist, actually created the anthrax biological weapon. It's biological because it's actually a living organism. He sent that out, if you remember, to Senator Daschle and some other individuals, and some folks at post offices were actually infected as well. The 2013 Boston Marathon bombing, the Tsarnaev brothers, one of them was killed after the bombing in a police shootout. The other one is in prison today. And a lot of you may not know about this one. This happened in 1984, and it was the first bioterror attack to be perpetrated against the United States on our soil. That was the Rajneeshis out in the Dalles, Oregon. You can actually watch a couple episodes that pertain to this actual terror attack on Forensic Files. And basically what they tried to do is make townspeople sick because they wanted to, it was right around election time, they wanted to keep people from going to the polls so they could elect their people and get them into office to control a lot of what was going on in the community. Like I said, anybody can be a terrorist, okay? Top left picture is Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. For decades, he threatened the United States citizens by mailing bombs. People were injured, people were killed. He also was somebody who was not happy with our government. Lower left is Eric Rudolph from the Atlanta Olympic Park bombing. In the center is Omar Mateen. You may recognize him. He's there with his beautiful family. You would never expect this guy to be a terrorist. He's the one who shot up the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. And then, of course, Timothy McVeigh, after his arrest in the upper right corner. Timothy McVeigh actually was executed not long after being found guilty. He actually waived his future attempts at trial, and he actually was put to death. Syed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, and you may recognize them as the shooters in San Bernardino, California. So all of these people were in some form radicalized by somebody or something. Terrorist recruiting. Terrorists are targeting America's youth. Now, what I want to explain to you is, while there are all different types of terrorism, I could talk till midnight tonight about the different types of terrorism and the different types of groups. My main focus tonight is to make sure that I increase the awareness of what is going on with the Islamic State and how they are reaching our youth in America. And they are doing that and radicalizing our young people and getting them to go overseas and fight and to commit acts of terrorism here within the United States. So they are targeting our youth. The Islamic State, you may know them as ISIS or ISIL. The Department of Homeland Security has done a great job since the September 11th attacks. The Department of Homeland Security was developed as a result of the Homeland Security Act of 2002 and the September 11th attacks. Since then, our extensive security measures have made it more difficult for 9/11 style attacks to be successful. It's going to be very difficult for a group to ever hijack multiple airliners and commit the attack that they did on 9/11. As a result of our measures, it's made it more difficult for them, so they have to, by other means, get to our people and commit terrorist attacks. And they take advantage of all available resources. They're using the internet, social media, they're using Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, chat rooms. They are even reaching our children and our young people through gaming systems, Xbox, PlayStation, in chat rooms through those means. The people that they target are vulnerable subjects. And if you think about how they, and you're going to see some details about how they actually draw people in, it's no different than the way our United States street gangs bring people in, recruit people. It's no different than our motorcycle clubs and other groups that bring people in. I just want to touch base on something here. The Clarion Project reveals that for every 800 people working to stop ISIS's online recruiting efforts, ISIS has 1,000 recruiters. So that'll tell you we're already behind the gun on that. When young people are reached, or anybody is reached by any type of group, whether it's Muslim extremists, whether it's someone from the KKK or some other white supremacist group, and they become radicalized, they are considered homegrown violent extremists, HGVEs, by our government. Youth vulnerabilities, characteristics commonplace for youth. Whoops, I'm sorry. For youth who are drawn in by ISIS recruiting or American street gangs, feelings of not fitting in with everybody else, feelings of being out of place with families, feeling out of place within society. They're in search of guidance, they're in search of acceptance, they desire to express themselves. A lot of them become isolated, and it's important to understand there's no single driving factor. And there are a lot of things that can come into play that will allow a young person to be taken in by the promises of extremist groups. It's been estimated that approximately 30,000 people from 85 countries have traveled to join extremist groups such as ISIS. And religion is suggested to be the leading factor behind radicalization. Now, I could go into a lot of different political things and religious things and other means by which people get into these groups, but the common factor is usually religion. Religion provides a sense of belonging and identity for those seeking meaning in their lives. For some, it lifts them from a life of underachievement, marginalization, criminality, or simply the mundane. Extremists use this to their advantage by attempting to recast individuals as heroes and champions working for a noble cause. So a lot of these terrorists, these extremists, whether they're Muslim extremists, whether they're in a white supremacist group or even a street gang, they are trying to build somebody up and give them what they're not receiving from their families and society. And the groups such as ISIS utilize propaganda that promotes a utopian caliphate, the opposite of what they feel they are offered in their current lives. It's always a promise. And a lot of the groups who bring people in to do these things are misleading the people. They're using them. They're basically just setting themselves up for failure. And believe me, the terrorist organizations don't care. They're just another person that they can use. Homegrown violent extremists. Those recruited, they're recruiting any social class, race, ethnicity, males, females. The 2016 NBC News report revealed that roughly 250 Americans had attempted to join ISIS, with examples of 15 who left the U.S. to engage in terrorist activities within that group. Mississippi honor students, they were boyfriend and girlfriend actually, And Jalen Young and Mohammed Daklala, two Starkville, Mississippi honor students. She was a cheerleader. He was a psychology student. They were arrested for attempting to travel from the U.S. to Syria to join the terror group. I mean, you know, both of them had promising futures. She was actually going to be going to, I believe, Mississippi State University, if I'm not mistaken, and had already enrolled. Terrible. Muhammad Azari, a California native, was arrested in 2020 in Tampa, Florida, after his plot to kill beachgoers at multiple Florida beaches was uncovered. He was motivated by the Pulse nightclub shooting. Azari pledged his allegiance to ISIS. His sister, Heba Azari, was subsequently killed by police as she attacked them with a butcher knife in Temple Terrace, Florida. So they're reaching people and they're drawing them in with promises and giving them things that they don't feel that they're receiving in life, and it makes them feel important and wanted and accepted. And that's why they do the things that they do. Relational development theory. This is what can lead to any individual joining any terrorist organization, street gangs, biker clubs. These are the 5 factors that come into play through relational development theory. The first one is initiating. That's the coming together of individuals, the stage in which an individual makes contact with another. At this stage, people acknowledge each other and begin to share discourses. Then we go to experimenting. Experimenting when one person seeks to know more about another and determines whether or not to continue the relationship. This is the probing stage where people make further evaluations of each other and look for common interest. Intensifying, stage number 3. This stage sees the development of relationships and close friends status. And when I go through these, you can actually apply these to any person joining any type of group. This is just the way it works as humans. Individuals begin to disclose more personal information and show commitment to the group at this point. This is the point where interpersonal intimacy is formed. Integrating, step number 4, is where people begin to identify themselves together or as a part of the same group. This is where tightly knit groups emerge. Relationships become private and persistent, with members wearing each other's identity through intimate tokens such as pictures, pins, and other connecting items. Bonding is the last step. The stage occurs as members begin to identify with individuals or groups publicly. The close relationship is represented by a formal public commitment to the relationship or affiliation. The stage usually includes pledges, ceremonies, or rituals. You see the young man on the right. He's raising his hand, just like those who pledge to support terrorist groups or join gangs or probably even fraternities, right? So it's common, and it's no different with terrorist organizations. Violent extremist activities, mass shootings. The picture on the top left is actually from the San Bernardino shootout incident. What you're seeing there, if you've never watched any of the videos, I actually watched this on TV as it was playing out, and actually had access to the SWAT team that entered the building and was able to listen to everything that went on for hours. But these terrorists actually tried to flee. They were chased by law enforcement, and there was a shootout in the middle of the street where they were both killed, and that's their vehicle and a lot of evidence that's laying around. Vehicle killings, the top right picture. That is the gentleman who actually rented a U-Haul truck and drove it down a bike path, killing people and hurting people up in New York City. Terrorist groups such as ISIS encourage followers to utilize whatever means available to commit acts of terror. If one can use explosives or a gun, use them. If one does not have access to such weapons, use a knife. If a knife is not available, use a vehicle. The terrorists do not force followers to attempt to work beyond their means. It's the act and the outcome are what matters to them, not the means. ISIS was successful in recruiting 3 Chicago suburban teens. They were all siblings in an attempt to leave the country to fight the terror organization. These 3 teens were actually arrested at the airport in Chicago. They were actually trying to leave the country, and they were going to fight with ISIS. It's amazing how young people are today and how easily they're influenced. And I'm sure they would have gotten there, and their opinions of what they were doing would probably change when they saw the seriousness of what they were involved in. Mitigating strategies. So how do we reduce the risk involved and stop some of this from happening? The most important thing is educating the public. It's important to understand that the FBI, the CIA, ATF, and other federal and state organizations, and even your local police can't be everywhere at once. So it's important for people to be educated and to be able to report things that they see, because it's the folks within your community that are going to be interacting with these terrorists, and you are the ones who are going to see things that are going on. Everybody has probably heard of see something, say something, a very popular term that was all over the TV for a long time. It's actually a DHS initiative, Department of Homeland Security, where they seek the public's assistance in helping them to identify possible threats. Again, because they can't be everywhere at once. The federal government can monitor social media platforms, and believe me, they do. You'll hear of a lot of things that are uncovered because they are monitoring platforms, and those who are freely talking about what they're doing and who they're involved with, it comes to light and arrests are made. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. You may have heard a lot about FISA over the past year or so with the FISA warrants that were used to monitor former President Trump and his campaign. FISA warrants are important. They give the government the ability to surveil anybody who might be involved with a foreign government and terrorist. Just like any other warrant, you need to have probable cause, and you have to show that there could possibly be a crime being committed or about to be committed in order for a FISA judge to actually issue that warrant. Designating groups as foreign terrorist organizations. The Department of State is the one who provides that designation. They actually submit something to Congress. If they don't hear back within so many days with Congress declining it, then it goes through and groups are labeled as terrorist organizations. And with that designation, our government can do a lot of things to help monitor those groups and make sure they're not involved in things they shouldn't be involved in. Legal responsibilities. I talked about if you see something, say something. Here's the importance of everybody in the community coming together to watch out for each other. DeShaney versus Winnebago County, 489 U.S. 189, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it is not the responsibility of the government to protect individual citizens. The courts ruled in that case that the complainant's rights under the substantive component of the Due Process Clause was not violated, as the state bears no responsibility for personal protections unless a special relationship exists. A special relationship would be if you're incarcerated or you're in custody somewhere, they would have a responsibility to protect you. But normal citizens, the government has no legal responsibility to protect you. So it's up to us to protect ourselves and our fellow neighbors. Mobilization indicators, things to watch for. And some of this can pertain to more radical extremists from abroad, and some of it can also pertain to here in the United States with domestic terrorism. In fact, I'll give you an example. The Columbine shooting and many other incidents that occurred, even the San Bernardino shooting, there were indicators that these things were going on, that something was being planned. the shooters in Columbine were actually communicating on social media and communicating with others. And of course, after the fact, people say, oh my goodness, you know, I should have acted on that. They were saying this, they were doing this. Same thing with the San Bernardino shooters. Most times you're going to see something, you're going to see behaviors that aren't right. And you're going to see other things such as preparing and disseminating a martyrdom video or statement or last will, seeking religious or political justification for a planned violent act, attempting to mobilize others to violence, especially family members and peers. You're going to be approached by those that you know, or if you're involved in this, that the people that you're around the most are the ones that you're going to approach to try to get them to help you. Seeking help from family or authority figures to enable travel to join terrorist groups overseas, just like the young folks from Chicago. Their parents couldn't believe it, that when the FBI arrested their children, they couldn't believe they had no idea that these children were communicating with ISIS. Preparing to travel to fight with or support terrorist groups, communicating intent to engage in violent extremist activity, a threat with justification or action, suspiciously obtaining or attempting, illegally or otherwise, to obtain explosive precursors, simulating an attack or assault or dry run with focus on local or other real-world targets, surveilling potential targets. Many of these folks, after attacks such as the Pulse nightclub, they found that the young man who actually committed that attack was actually at Disney and other places doing surveillance to list those as possible or potential targets before hitting the nightclub. And then inquiring about jobs that provide sensitive access in a suspicious manner. Obviously, I work in law enforcement. There are things that we look for. Not long ago, we recovered a stolen vehicle, and in that vehicle, we found a bunch of stolen uniforms, security uniforms, and a bunch of gear. So we weren't sure exactly what was taking place, but the first thing I thought of when I saw it was that there was something going on where somebody was planning on using those uniforms to possibly gain access to someplace they shouldn't be. And I try to keep the PowerPoint brief, and we have a Q&A session. Anybody has questions, again, I want to reiterate that terrorism is not just Muslim extremists. And a lot of people following 9/11 made the mistake of stereotyping Muslims and as threats. And that was a big mistake, okay? Just like in World War II, the president at the time, because we were attacked by Japan at Pearl Harbor, he made the decision that all Japanese Americans needed to be put into internment camps, which was a huge mistake. You can't just assume that everybody is involved in something like this. Again, it's extremist views. We can all follow our religions, we can all have political views, and we don't interfere with other people. We don't act with violence. These are people who have extremist views. And of course, if I had time, I could go into a lot of the factors that come into play that make people view violence as a justifiable action to support their cause. Okay, for example, if you are an anti-abortion person and you bomb an abortion clinic, you know, these people that do that type of thing are those who justify what they're doing based on their beliefs. And we can't do that, obviously, with everybody. It's extremist and those with extremist beliefs.
Okay, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and start posting them in the chat room or the Q&A box. Richard, would you, I don't know, you may not have this background, but I was wondering if it's more common, I mean, talking about individual extremists, like the Unabomber, is that more common than the group extremists, like, you know?
That's a very good question. Very good question. So you're talking about what has been referred to in the past as a lone wolf. Okay. Yes, there can be lone wolves. However, it's few and far between. They are radicalized somehow by something, by someone, by a group, by their hatred for the government. Timothy McVeigh, while he worked with three co-conspirators, he was against our government, and he was a former military person. He served in the U.S. Army. There are lone wolves. They're few and far between, because usually they have some type of contact with somebody or some group that radicalizes them and changes their thought process.
Okay. Karen would like to know how you define extremist views.
Extremist views. If you are somebody who's willing to use violence to try to change other people, society, the government, that's an extremist. Most people are not going to go that far. We just went through a 2020 political thing where you've got half the country supporting President Trump and half the country not supporting President Trump. And it could be very bitter. And there are families and friends who are not speaking today because they disagree, but they don't resort to violence. Mm-hmm. So when you incorporate violence into it, and usually the violence, they justify killing people. Those are the extremists. They justify killing people based on their beliefs, whether it be political or religious.
Lisa would like to know if you can speak to the recent rise of the alt-right groups, like those who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Okay. And are those groups active in Leon County? And if so, how can we identify them or root them out?
Okay, very good questions. The alt-right, first of all, I'll say this: our government has deemed the far-right extremists as our greatest threat here in the United States, and that is a fact. Okay, you are less likely to have a Muslim extremist enter this country and commit a terrorist attack than someone on the right who actually does something because they're upset with the government or some other reason. But the alt-right, the far right, those are the folks that are the greatest threat right now. And as far as in Tallahassee, the only group that I'm aware of that may still be in Tallahassee, if you remember, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, the Ku Klux Klan was actually recruiting in Tallahassee. They were throwing plastic bags in people's driveways with decorative rocks or candy in it with recruiting materials. I remember that was on WCTV and WTXL for a couple of days. They were actively recruiting. That was a white nationalist group. So, as far as Antifa, Antifa is going to be ruled a terrorist organization here soon. Anybody who resorts to violence, they are going to be ruled a terrorist organization. It's coming. The attack on the Capitol, there's still a lot of evidence that needs to be uncovered. While they were saying they were all Trump supporters, that's not true. There are a lot of those fellows in there who were in Antifa, and there were even some Black Lives Matter folks in there. The young man who was arrested, Sullivan, his last name's Sullivan, he has both Antifa ties and Black Lives Matter, and actually made the mistake of being recorded there, inciting some of this stuff. I've seen some of the videos, and he made a mistake. If you're going to do things like that, the last thing you want to do is make sure that everybody sees it, right? Especially when there's violence involved. I will say that with the way things are going right now, the far right folks are going to be the ones that are going to be creating the problems in the future, and it's scary. You know, our government knows about it. That's the good thing, and they keep an eye on them as best as they can. However, I will say this: regardless of the group and what they have going on, they have the same constitutional protections that you and I have. So search and seizure, spying on these folks, and going to their properties, and wiretapping, that all has to be done the right way, and search warrants have to be secured based on probable cause, which means you have to have evidence to show that a crime has been committed or could be committed or in the process of being committed. So they do have the same protections. And actually, if you look up in the Northwest, Wisconsin and Minnesota areas, you will see that there are terrorist training camps. I believe Bill O'Reilly reported on that about 4 or 5 years ago and actually showed video of some of these terrorist training camps. And they're running around with AK-47s and like having drills. That's okay. As long as they don't commit a crime, they're perfectly within their rights to do that. I can run around my backyard here in Wakulla County with an AK-47. As long as I'm not endangering somebody else or committing a crime, it's perfectly legal. So they have the same constitutional protections that we have, and unfortunately, they use those constitutional protections in their favor.
Mm-hmm. Benita would like to know, why did the politicians claim that Antifa was only an ideology?
That's a very good question. I don't know why they would say that. I scratch my head sometimes because obviously they're not. And there were some politicians who said that. In fact, I believe our new president said that they were just I forget what word he used, but that they weren't an actual organization. Now, they are organized. And if you saw some of the video that of the violence that they were involved in, they had trucks that pulled up, rented trucks with a lot of their stuff, their supplies and things that they unloaded before some of these riots. So they are organized. I can't say that this is 100% correct, but I have heard reports that George Soros is behind some of the funding of both Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And you know, I have no qualms against any group, but if they incite violence and if they incite violence against police officers specifically, they're a threat, and they're a threat to everybody, every citizen. And you could see that last year with all the riots that took place night after night, and how they took over one town up in the far west and created their own little town, basically. Normal people just don't do that. They're extremists too.
Benita also asked, convicted domestic terrorist Susan Rosenberg, who bombed the U.S. Capitol in '83, she was then pardoned in 2001, but she's back on the radar. So she continues to raise funds for radical groups, and Benita would like to know, does law enforcement continue to track these extremists?
Oh, definitely. You know, whether you're pardoned or not, if, you know, it's your affiliations. I mean, they see who you're involved with. Most people of that nature are not hiding it. They're proud of it. And if they're involved in any types of activities that involve violence, yeah, believe me, they're being watched now. You know, I'm not going to say that our federal government or state law enforcement is breaking the law or violating somebody's constitutional rights. But I would say that there's a good possibility that they're being watched a little more than most people are.
Lisa asks, are there treatment strategies to deprogram extremists, or are there, I mean, I know there are actual psychological programming that can be done, but as an individual rather than an institution.
Sure. I watched a video last week of my undergraduate for my doctoral degree is Homeland Security. I watched a video last week from a former Muslim extremist, a young lady from Syria who married an American, and he indoctrinated her and radicalized her, and he got involved in very serious fighting over in Syria, and she saw what it was doing to her community and family and friends, and decided that she did not want her 3 sons to be involved in that, and she didn't want to lose her sons because she knew what was going to happen, because she could see him actually indoctrinating and radicalizing the children. They'd run around the yard shooting AK-47s, and we're talking about very young children. These children were under the age of 10, and she didn't want that, and she left him, divorced him. She actually moved to the United States, and I watched a video of her, and when she talked about, it was actually a three-part video, and she actually talked about wanting to get away from that and changing her way of thinking, because she was an extremist as well, and she fully supported him until she saw what was actually taking place, and then she didn't want to lose her sons. And she talked about that, about changing, or reprogramming her mind, her brain, to see that what she was doing and her thought processes of everything was just not right. I'm not aware of specific programs that you can get into. I'm sure there are plenty of those to get into, depending on where you're at. There are a lot of people who need to be evaluated. And of course, mental health is huge, even in everything that we do in law enforcement. We are constantly responding to calls for Baker Acts, and even children at the schools are being Baker Acted almost every day. And it just amazes me how this takes place. So there are a lot of people who need help out there. And if you're an extremist and you want to get away from that, I'm sure you have to want to get away from it, first of all, but I'm sure you can find help for that.
Now, you mentioned law enforcement, and I know you're a crime scene investigator in Wakulla County. Oh, we do have a raised hand, sir. If you'd like to ask questions, please go ahead and type those in the chat room or in the Q&A, please. But I was going to ask you that if you had investigated any extremist localities, or have you found any in Wakulla County, I guess, since you're in Wakulla?
Actually, no. I do know that when I first moved here, which was in 2013, we actually moved here from Ohio, and we bought our home here in Wakulla County. I do know that there was at least one church and possibly a second that were spray painted with KKK on the side of them. And I know they did an investigation and didn't find anything. They didn't solve it. They didn't figure out who did it, but I think it was probably kids that did it, just trying to stir things up. But I've never had to, unfortunately, I've never had to investigate anything. I believe me, I investigate a lot of other things, but as far as I know, could we have extremists in our community? Absolutely. And, while it may not be, extremists, like Muslim extremists, we could possibly definitely have some of the folks here that are the white separatists or white nationalist groups or individuals who live in this area. They may not operate the actual organization here. And you can actually go on to a couple websites. You can go to the DHS website, the FBI website, and you can go to, forget what the map is. There's a map you can go to that actually shows all the different terrorist organizations and where they are in the United States. And if I think of it, I'll throw it out there, but it's a pretty good map you can go to actually click on them, and you can actually see the white supremacist groups and other ones all over the country and where they're located.
Don would like to know, you had mentioned that only Antifa, well, he didn't say only Antifa, but he says, do you consider the U.S. Capitol insurrectionists to be domestic terrorists? You mentioned only Antifa and Black Lives Matter as groups involved. Which right-wing terrorist groups were involved?
As in attacking the Capitol? Yes, they would be domestic terrorists. When you resort to violence, you kind of draw a fine line sometimes, depending on what takes place. Domestic terrorism basically are acts that are conducted by folks who actually live in this country. They're American citizens. Now, a lot of people confuse terrorism with being terrorized. Okay, if I was at the Capitol, I don't believe I would view it as terrorism. It's a little bit different for me. Now, Nancy Pelosi or other females who were actually in the Capitol, and they were scared and they didn't have any weapons. They were dependent on, Secret Service and the Capitol Police to protect them. they could very easily say this was an act of terrorism. However, it's got to be there have to be certain factors involved for them to actually label it as terrorism, such as violence against innocent people, violence, the threat of violence for a political nature, or to change government attitudes, or change laws, or change society. So if you put those indicators in there, yeah, I would say there were probably some folks there who you could consider domestic terrorists.
Do you know which right-wing groups were involved in that?
No, I don't. Investigations take a lot of time. And I will say this, I believe in nothing that I receive from the mainstream media. They all have their biases, and they're going to report things because it generates ratings for them and money. So I go clearly on investigations and the evidence that is collected due to those investigations. Right now, there's still an ongoing investigation. Obviously, they've arrested quite a few people. They are interviewing people. Those people will talk. They will explain why they were there. If someone paid them, if they went on their own, if they're a part of a group, someone's going to talk, and they're going to get all this information. I can't, make a determination based on what I've seen or heard on the news, because I don't find that information very credible. So if I were to talk to somebody who was involved, somebody that works with the Capitol Police or somebody in the FBI, and they shared some information with me, I would consider that probably more credible than anything I would hear on the news. So basically, you have to wait until the investigation is concluded, and if they decide to start a committee that's going to conduct an investigation, like the 9/11 Commission, what they did there, the truth will come out, and we'll have all the details, and it'll eventually be released to the public.
Well, because so many conspiracy theories are circulated basically by the media, can individuals and networks be held accountable for causing unbalanced individuals to act or to commit these crimes?
Or you mean, can the media be held accountable?
I think that's what she's asking.
Yeah.
Benita?
Well, the problem with that is, we have freedom of speech. You have freedom of speech, and you have protected speech. The media has been able to say what they want for a long time now. And there were a lot of things that, such as Donald Trump being involved with Russia, that was proven through an investigation to be nothing but a hoax. There was no evidence that showed that he colluded with Russia in any way. And of course, those documents have just been released in the last week. They were declassified and put out. I believe you'll be able to find them here soon. I'm not sure who has them right now, but they have been released. A lot of the media is reporting on a lot of this. But the media went along with this the whole time and kept reporting this stuff, and they had no facts whatsoever. And they couldn't have facts because the investigation was still ongoing. But you'll be able to read some of those reports that have just been released and declassified, and you'll see that there were a lot of things that were going on that shouldn't have gone on, like phony FISA warrants that were signed by the FISA courts based on erroneous information, because certain members of the FBI provided false information, and the FISA courts, it's the FBI, it's a law enforcement agency, they're going to assume they're telling the truth, right? So they sign the warrants for the surveillance.
Linda, she's found the map. It's on the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yes.
Which shows
yes, that's it.
In every state.
Yeah, the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thank you, Linda. I couldn't think of it off the top of my head, but I've viewed that many times. And if you actually look at North Florida, you may still see that white extremist group in the North Tallahassee area. It's pretty good because you can click on that map and it'll actually zoom in. You're able to see exactly what groups they are and what their beliefs are, and their perspective on things. I don't know. I scratch my head sometimes. I grew up north, and I knew there were, like the Ku Klux Klan. I knew some guys who were in it. Not that I knew them and associated with them. They were older guys. I was a kid, and they were well known to be involved in the white supremacist group, and just scary people with their thought processes.
Absolutely. Don asks, do you know why the 2009 Department of Homeland Security report on right-wing domestic terrorism was removed and the unit disbanded?
No, I don't. That's a good question. I'll have to find out why. The Department of Homeland Security, they have a lot of different areas that focus on infrastructure, protections, and so many different areas that like when they talked about the possibility of there being problems with the past election and election fraud. There's a specific area, a group or agency within DHS that actually investigates things like that that have to do with the internet and online and electronic data. But I'm not sure why they did that. But believe me, there's somebody watching these folks, and obviously the FBI, the ATF is probably involved because all of these groups like to secure weapons and ammunition. And, you know, if you try to go buy a gun right now or ammunition, it's very hard to find. From the middle of last year to this point, there have been so many millions of guns and ammunition sold, you can't even buy it. It's tough to buy right now. So a lot of people are buying this stuff, and it's kind of scary. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But believe me, anybody who's out there right now who's operating any of these organizations, they're being watched. They have to be, especially anybody right wing. And the government knows that they're our greatest threat, and they are. How many abortion clinic bombings? How many radical environmentalists are out there doing things? Very few that we know of. You know, how many Muslim extremists have committed terrorist attacks recently? Very few. You know, but the right wing, you know, a lot of times you don't see a lot of this stuff on the news. And I've had to study a lot of these different things like Charlotte, North Carolina, and some of these places where they had confrontations between some not far left groups, but left groups and these far right groups. And they were violent and bloody, and people were hurt, people were killed. And it's unfortunate, but you have this clash of groups where one group sees things one way and another group sees it the complete opposite. And that's very dangerous.
Deborah asked, what is the name of the organization being talked about in North Florida? Deborah, I looked at the map as we were speaking just now, and it says that Real Republic of Florida is in Tallahassee, and let's see, I think it was the Israel United in Christ. Yes, Israel United in Christ, which is a black separatist group.
Yeah, you can actually read some of these names of these groups and never think they're involved in anything nefarious. And when you delve into what they're actually about and what they teach and what they promote, it's violence. And they're extremists. Now, will they lash out at some point? We don't know. Until they do, and until they break laws, they're perfectly free, just like everybody else, to explore their religion and freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is more than just talking. You can do things that are physical, that are freedom of speech as well, that are protected. So unless they break a law, they're perfectly within their rights to do what they do.
Don would like to know if you consider the 3%ers, the Proud Boys, and the Oath Keepers domestic terrorists.
Oh, yes, definitely. I don't know a lot about the Proud Boys. I just started hearing a lot about them. But there are some groups out there who are not, you know, as well known as, you know, the Ku Klux Klan and the skinheads and folks like that. But definitely, if they engage in any violence against anybody else, they're domestic terrorists.
Okay. Lisa doesn't have a question. She apparently disagrees with you about Russian hoaxes and Trump's.
Okay, well, you know what?
Which is fine.
Everybody's entitled to their opinion. The
Exactly.
documents have been released, and they have been put out. I heard over the past probably 4 days, the documents were declassified and put out, and you can believe what you want. The investigation was completed, and what they didn't redact out, you can read, and there's a lot of information in there that shows there was absolutely no collusion. So
now you said the word redact. What in your opinion would they have redacted?
they redact information that might, well, this is what they say. They redact information that they believe could be a national security threat. So you wouldn't want to release certain information if it would pose a threat in the future to the United States or United States citizens. There are certain things you would not want to disclose because it could be dangerous for certain people. So there are some things that are redacted. I don't think that these documents that were just released are heavily redacted, because I've heard a lot of information. I've seen some reports that people have put out, some of the pages that were involved, and I didn't see a lot of redacted information.
You mentioned George Soros funding Antifa and BLM. Do you know where you heard that? I know you said you heard.
It's something that is talked about a lot. I do know that he does fund. Now, don't get me wrong. George Soros does fund a lot of good things too, and he has donated a lot of money to a lot of good causes. But there are some organizations that he supports financially, and they're questionable organizations. I'd have to look up some of the documents that I've read. That I've actually written large papers on this, and specifically George Soros. So I do have some reference material that I could pull up if anybody wants it. They can shoot me an email at renglish@wcso.org, and I'll find information for you and send it to you. And believe me, I don't pull things from the mainstream media. I use information that is from the government. I use information that is from peer-reviewed articles with research. I will never post anything. And actually, if you look at the bottom, my last slides here are all of my references. Okay, these are all the sources that I use to give you all the information that's on here. Okay, so I concentrate on research, which a lot of people don't do. They just copy or repeat information they hear from others, and not knowing if it's actually legitimate or not. So I do like to do research and actually provide citations and references. So if folks want to find something, they can go see it for themselves.
I did post your email address there. So if anybody is interested in reaching out to you directly, his email address is in the chat room. And that about does it. I don't think we have any more questions or comments in the chat room. So I will round us up for this evening. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Informing us about domestic radicalization and terrorism. I know it's on everybody's minds lately, and important topic to talk about. Next time will be February 4th. We will not be talking about something quite so serious. We will be reinstituting our Frolics of Florida event virtually. So if you've attended it before, basically it is the mating habits of native wildlife to Florida. So kind of in time for Valentine's Day. So we'll do a lecture with one of our educators at the museum, actually our programs manager, Allison Ashcroft. And then following that, you can always sign up to do the live tour with Frolics of Florida on February 13th or 14th. So thank everyone for being here, and please stay safe out there, stay healthy, and we will see you next time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.